Hello YouTube, this is Froogle and welcome back to our fully loaded first impressions of FS2Crew. I got called out for saying FS2Crew. Whatever. FS2Crew's NGX Reboot. Now, in the part 1 we did the pre-flight. I showed you how to pre-flight the aircraft. We walked through some of the changes with NGX Reboot, FS2Crew's NGX Reboot. So in this part we're actually going to do the takeoff, but there's some bits that we still have to do. First of all, we've just pushed back here, so we need to set the takeoff flaps, and then we're going to do a flight controls check, which is brand new in FS2Crew in the NGX Reboot. So, looking at the tutorial, all we need to do is say the words flight controls check, so we'll go ahead and do that. Oh no, we don't, we need to set the flaps first, my apologies. Flaps 5.
Flaps 5.
We will now just wait for the flaps to finish their motion down to flaps 5 position, at which point we'll do the flight controls check. Now, if you had the Airbus version of FS2Crew, you're very familiar with doing a flight controls check, but it was not something that we did in the previous version of FS2Crew, but now we do, which is kind of cool. I like that very much. Since my controls, I always forget to make sure that they're going through full motion before I take off, so this is a good test for that, if nothing else. Flight controls check.
Ready.
Full left, center,
Check.
full right, center,
Check.
full up, full down, center,
Check.
full left, center,
Check.
full right, center.
Check.
Flight controls check complete. And that's the trigger for him to carry on now with his before taxi procedure, and it's the trigger for us to go over to computer number 2 since this is fully loaded, and I'll show you some of the cool stuff you can do with the Avlasoft EFB, since it's quite a while since I've used that in a video. Now, the EFB is the electronic flight bag, and it's basically a tool. You can use it for flight planning. I wouldn't recommend it. I use PFPX or Simbri for flight planning, but it's very good for monitoring your progress in flight and setting up procedures and stuff like that. So obviously the first procedure we want is to taxi, so we're going to taxi via Alpha and then Golf out to runway. It's actually 26, not 27. So what we can do here, if I right click here, we say select taxiways, taxi to the runway from the current position to runway 26, going via Alpha, and then Golf, and click on OK, and it draws a handy little line for us so we know which route we're following. The other thing we're going to do is the departure. Now, we're not following a SID, we're just going to join the ORTAC 2A airway out to ORTAC. So over here we just click on departure here and we say direct to ORTAC, and our departure is now set and we're all good to go. So we go back to the ground now, bring back the FS2Crew NGX Reboot SOP1 tutorial. Remember, I'm following SOP1. There are 3 SOPs in the NGX Reboot. I'm keeping it simple in this set of videos. We'll do a SOP3 video later on. So all we need to do now, let me just scroll down here, is that one, the before taxi checklist. So here we go.
Before taxi checklist. Generators. On. Probe 8. On. Anti-ice. Off. Isolation valve. Auto. Engine start switches. Continuous. Recall.
Checked.
Checked. Auto brake. RTO. Engine start levers.
Idle to 10.
Flight controls.
Checked.
Ground equipment.
Clear.
Clear. Before taxi checklist complete.
So now we can begin our taxi. So I'm going to switch on over back to the EFB on computer number 2 so I can see where I am. And we will call clear on the left. Clear on the left.
Clear right.
Release the brakes. Bring up the power. Hello. Now, having released the brakes, bit of a cut there, because having released the brakes, that's when I found out that my throttles weren't plugged in. See, even Froogle does the same mistakes that you make, so now I need to go ahead and manually set my flaps again. Hang on. Flaps 5. Yeah, he's going to ignore me, so I'll manually put those flaps out. Silly Froogle. I think we're all good now. That was foolish. Hopefully everything else still works. Come out to flaps 2. little bit beyond flaps 5, so bring them back a touch. I'm using the Go Flight throttle quadrant, which I still very much like, but I haven't put the overlays on. You get these plastic overlays which give you notches for the various flap positions. I didn't want to do that since I fly so many different types of aircraft. You know, it wouldn't make sense to have those on for flying a Cessna, for example, but I'm beginning to think maybe I should. Alright, so the brakes are released. Now we'll bring the power up.
Flight deck. Okay, thanks. Captain, the cabin is secure.
Thank you. And you can see over there that we are now following our route, our taxi route. Need to make sure I stay on Alpha and not wander off it, which I'm pretty sure is that yellow line right there. Now the cool bit that's going to happen now is the takeoff, and I mentioned in part 1 there are some subtle differences in the NGX Reboot SOP1 from the old FS2Crew, and you're going to see some of those on takeoff. New callouts, for example, you're calling out when you're setting toga, and all sorts of stuff like that, which is ever so awesome. And then the tutorial is also pointing out additional stuff that we really didn't worry about with the old FS2Crew, such as at what point the pilot releases controls over to the autopilot, and little reminders that as the pilot, you are responsible, Captain, you are responsible for the autopilot, not the first officer. So although we have commands in FS2Crew to get the first officer to do all sorts of stuff with the autopilot and the MCP, you don't typically do that. What you typically do is do it all yourself, but then make a call out to confirm what you just did. I'll try to remember to do some of that. So as we turn on various headings, I'll just confirm, I'll set the heading in the MCP and then get the first officer there to confirm what I just did. Which doesn't really do anything for flying. It doesn't change how the aircraft flies or anything like that, but it certainly does add to the realism if you're trying to simulate being a 737 NG captain. Now I'm just going to get through this turn here, and I'm going to bring up the tutorial again on computer number 2 and see at what point I'm supposed to do this next part, which I think is now actually, but we'll get on the straightaway so I can look around without wandering off my course here. You see the Avlosoft DFB there doing what it does. It's actually a very cool tool. I haven't given it much screen time for about a year, and I don't really have a reason for that. I just stopped using it. I wanted to go a little bit more isolated, a little bit more real, and having a tool like that in many instances is a bit of a cheat. You don't typically have an EFB in a 737, but it is a very cool tool, so we should start using it. Alright, let's bring up SOP tutorial 1. One eye on my course, one eye on the other screen, making sure I don't wander off. Okay, alright, so we're not going to do the next checklist until we're actually approaching the runway. But we could do it now because the cabin has been notified as secure, so we could actually do it now. Let's go ahead and do that. Turn off the mute here. Watching my speed as well. Before takeoff checklist, please.
Before takeoff checklist. Flaps.
Flaps 5, green light.
Stabilizer trim.
5.0 units.
Before takeoff checklist complete.
And that's all there is to it. What we have now is once we actually get to the runway, we go ahead and do the call out to start the runway entry procedure, which makes sure all the lights are on and everything else. And there's another call there which we didn't used to have in FS2Crew, just as I call clear on the left before moving off from stationary. After pushback, we also call that when moving off from stationary on the hold to enter the runway. But we'll do that in a moment when we get there. I gotta say, I am very much enjoying the NGX Reboot. It's, for SOP1 at least, it's not dramatically different to what we had before. If you've already got FS2Crew or just bought it, don't worry too much about the upgrade just yet. You know, get some time out of the one you just bought. I know somebody on Facebook commented that they had just bought FS2Crew and then the reboot came out. Don't worry about it too much. The only things that are different in SOP1 at least are just additional calls, a little bit more realism. But if you've never used something like FS2Crew and never had a virtual co-pilot, then you won't really miss that stuff, to be honest. Alright, so we're coming up on our turn here. I'm going to keep the speed down 10 knots or less. Well, 11 knots, but I have come off the power. Hopefully it cruises down a little bit. No. Apply a little bit of braking here and we'll start our turnaround. And I'll walk you through what the tutorial says is about to happen as we line up and hold here. Not line up, as we hold here. Which will be right about here. Interesting as well, watching that green recognition bar to see some of the phrases that NGX Reboot does recognize. Okay, so looking at the tutorial, it says I have to speak the words runway entry procedure, and then when we're done I need to say clear on the left. Now what I need to do is turn on the weather radar, terrain display if I want it. What the first officer is going to do, all the pilot monitoring, he's going to notify the cabin crew to sit down, he's going to turn the strobes on, landing lights on, transponder, he's going to do all that lovely stuff, and I don't have to do very much at all, which is one of the beauties of something like FS2Crew. So, runway entry procedure.
Check.
So weather radar is now on, you can see the lines just came up.
Cabin crew, take your seats.
He's done his notification. Gonna wait for him to be done. We'll check nobody's running around taking photographs. I know that Luke Pabari likes to get up close and personal with large jets, so we'll check that we're not going to run him over. Clear on the left.
Clear right.
And we'll line up. Now, the next bit's going to happen in a hurry, so I'm not going to talk to you guys too much. I'm not going to do the whole sterile cockpit thing. I think that's a little bit silly, unless you're training to be a pilot. This is a sim. Oh, hello. Cancel that. Whoa. Apparently the reversers just kicked in. Who knew? That's a byproduct of my throttles being disconnected at the wrong time. So what's going to happen now is we're going to say takeoff, and then we're going to say N1 toga to confirm that we just pressed the toga button, which is obviously a click spot up on the MCP there.
275,
Other than that, it's quite normal.
300 feet
I will be flying until we turn on course, you know, and get ourselves established on the airway. As it said earlier on, at that point we'll go over to the autopilot. Now, notice I don't have LNAV selected. That's because we're not following a SID on departure. We're flying all by vectors, typically. VNAV is selected, and that's going to give me a flight path here, showing me where I need to point the nose in order to maintain a good VNAV profile. As we start our turn over here, I will engage LNAV, and the flight director here will give me bars, vertical bars, to show me which way I need to turn and stuff like that. We won't actually engage the autopilot until we are established on this course, climbing up to 4900, and trimmed. You can't engage the autopilot on a 737 NGX unless the aircraft is trimmed. Otherwise, all sorts of nasty stuff happens. You get warnings, alarms going off, and basically you sit here going, what? I did that already. Okay, here we go. Takeoff. Oops, let me turn off hard mute. Takeoff.
Check.
It's 40%. N1 toga. N1 toga.
Check.
Caution, short
Thrust
runway,
descent.
short runway.
Checked.
80 knots.
Checked.
V1.
Rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up. You hear me trimming already. Alright, now we can start our turn. I'm going to wait until we bring the nose down a little bit. The acceleration height. Engage LNAV.
LNAV.
Flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
Flaps up.
Flaps up.
Just trimming again now. There we are. Trimming it. Select Command A.
Command A.
Heading 348.
Checked.
After takeoff checklist, please.
After takeoff checklist. Engine bleeds. On. Packs. Auto. Landing gear. Up and off. Flaps. Up. No lights. After takeoff checklist complete.
And that's all there is to it. So now we'll set in our cruise altitude at 190. We do have a constraint which could hold us down. I can override that.
Erase the habit.
Go for it.
Check.
What I'm going to do is change my range here on this display. There's our constraint right there. We can blast right through that if we give them clearance by ATC. And we'll assume that we are. So I'm going to do an altitude intervene right now. You should see the engines coming up, the nose will start to come up, our vertical speed will increase as we point upwards and head on up.
Altitude set standard.
And we're set standard. And that's all there is to it. Really isn't much more to do. What we need to do, and why isn't this climbing? Let me try the altitude thing once again. There we go. That will do it. What we do need to do is start thinking about our descent procedure. So you can see top of climb is coming up right here. Let me pop this open. Top of climb is coming up right here. Top of descent is actually very soon after that. But because we haven't set in anything to do with our approach, it's not showing us where top of descent is. Come on now. Let me drag that. For example, if I change my range here, there is no top of descent. So we do need to set up our approach. So, let's go ahead and do that over in EFB real quick. We won't worry about this aircraft. It's all going to be managed by the pilot monitoring for right now. But over in the EFB, here we are en route. Everything is looking quite good. We're a little bit off course, but we'll establish fairly soon. So the arrival, we're going to be taking runway 27 left. So we'll check on here and say select start. Sorry, 26 left, my apologies. And we're coming in via the Astra 4C star. Like so. So we will activate that. And you can see that's a fairly nice course. All the way down here and then turn right. And then our approach after the star on Astra 4C is going to be select the approach, runway 26 left, ILS to 26 left via Astra. Click on that and you can see there's a very, very nice pattern drawn. Very nice, easy approach. Activate. So it's the Astra 4C approach to runway 26 left via Astra. Transition via Astra. We can go and set that up now, which obviously is a little bit unusual and early, but we kind of have to because it's such a short flight. So departures and arrivals. EGKK arrival is going to be ILS 26 left. We'll scroll down to the next page. Astra 4C via transition Astra execute. Now with all that done, that will give us a top of descent. There, just ahead of Kathy. So we're all good. Oh, they want to release again. Go for it. Go for it.
Check.
But he's good. He's going to go ahead and do his stuff. There really is nothing left for us to do. We've got a warning here saying drag is going to be required after GWC. There's not much else for us to do now until we get closer to the top of the descent and we can begin our descent procedure and all that good stuff. Please don't pick that up. He didn't pick that up. Good. So I'm going to cut the video here. I'll see you in part 3, which is planning the descent into Gatwick with FS2Crew NGX Reboot. As always, my name is Froogle. Thank you so very much for watching and I'll see you next time.